My parents skipped my wedding because I got married before my imperfect sister. Now, their carefully crafted family image is finally unraveling. 8 months ago, after 4 years together, I, 32F, married the love of my life. Everyone attended, except my parents and my sister, Molen, 30F. While my sister's absence didn't surprise me, my parents' decision to skip such an important day was a painful but predictable blow. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. Growing up, Molen was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. She excelled at everything: spelling bees, science fairs, talent shows. By high school, she was class president, valedictorian, and prom queen. Tall, slender, and conventionally beautiful. She even pursued modeling before shifting her focus to business. When she landed her first modeling job in college, my parents threw a lavish celebration, proudly framing her headshot above the fireplace. It's still there. That same year, I graduated with a degree in computer science. My achievement was met with a brief "well done" before they moved on to planning Molen's next photo shoot. By 30, she had a corner office and a corporate car, climbing the executive ladder with ease. Meanwhile, I built a stable career as a mid-level software developer, decent, respectable, but nothing worth bragging about at family gatherings. On top of that, I was shorter and bigger than my sister, which my mother never let me forget. She constantly signed me up for fitness classes, pushed me onto diets, and made backhanded comments. Molen never struggles with her weight. She'd say, "You could look as nice as your sister if you just put in a little more effort." By high school, I learned to tune it out, but the damage was already done. Eventually, I stopped trying to win their approval. I quit the clubs they wanted me to join, abandoned the hobbies they pushed on me, and even attempted modeling once, a humiliating failure my sister never let me live down. In my mid-20s, I finally let go. Instead of chasing their impossible standards, I focused on building a life where I was valued for who I was, not how I measured up to Molen. That's when things got easier. Our interactions became surface level, polite but distant. At family gatherings, I smiled and nodded as they gushed about Molen's latest promotion, boyfriend, or exotic vacation. They never seemed to notice my emotional detachment. Why would they? They had their star. Then, I met my husband at a tech conference through a mutual friend. Unlike my family, he really saw me. He loved my dry humor, my coding skills, and even my body. He never made me feel like I needed to change. After 4 years together, he proposed in the most perfect way, just the two of us, at home, eating takeout while watching our favorite show. It was simple, it was real. When I told my parents, their reaction was telling. No excitement, no congratulations, just silence. Then, my mother sighed and asked if I was sure I wanted to jump right in, or if I'd rather get in shape first. My father barely said a word. At our engagement party, my husband noticed their odd behavior. They spent most of the night whispering over my mother's phone, only for him to later overhear them consoling a crying Molen. Apparently, this wasn't the plan. They had never expected me to marry first. And they made sure to remind me of that throughout the wedding planning process. My mother had endless Pinterest boards for Molen's hypothetical wedding but showed zero interest in mine. When I picked my dress, a simple yet elegant A-line gown that made me feel beautiful, her only comment was that it was practical and suitable for my figure. In the end, my future mother-in-law stepped in to help, treating me like the daughter she never had. When it came time to send out invitations, I double and triple-checked that my parents received theirs. The electronic ones had read receipts. The physical copies were confirmed as delivered. Yet, as the RSVP deadline passed, they hadn't responded. I called, I texted, I emailed, nothing but vague excuses about busy schedules. I had a wedding to plan, so I eventually let it go. My in-laws stepped up, helping with everything from seating charts to flower arrangements. My husband's sister even threw me a beautiful bridal shower, without a single mention of my family's absence. Despite it all, the wedding was perfect. A serene morning ceremony followed by an intimate garden reception. Guests told us how radiant we looked, how deeply in love we seemed. Still, there were moments when the ache of their absence hit me like a punch to the chest, seeing the empty front row seats, missing the father-daughter dance. After the honeymoon, I called them, needing answers. My mother launched into a dramatic tirade, claiming they never received an invitation. She painted herself as the victim, lamenting how she had always dreamed of helping her daughters plan their weddings. How could I exclude them from such an important day? I was stunned. I knew for a fact they had received their invitations. I even confirmed it again while we were on the phone. But I didn't argue. I didn't call them out on their gaslighting. Because, for the first time, I realized I didn't need to. Their perfect family image had already begun to crack, and for once, I wasn't the one scrambling to hold it together. I apologized for the supposed mistake and hung up. I didn't have the energy to argue. Later, my husband brought up something I had tried to ignore, all the signs that my parents had never intended to be part of my wedding. He pointed out how, when we announced our engagement, they looked more shocked than happy, how they never once offered to help with the planning, how they always had an excuse to avoid involvement. He hadn't mentioned it before because he didn't want to add to my stress, but in hindsight, the pattern was undeniable. The truth was simple: they couldn't stand the idea of me, the daughter they never celebrated, getting married before their beloved Molen. It hurt, not just because they missed my wedding, but because it confirmed what I had always feared. In their eyes, I would never be enough. But life moved on, and so did they. Molen recently got engaged to a man she's been dating for just a year, and this time, my parents are fully invested. Family members tell me they're throwing themselves into planning her wedding, booking luxury venues, shopping for designer dresses, and reveling in mother-daughter outings I was never offered. Yet, something unexpected happened. A large number of relatives have quietly refused to attend Molen's wedding or engagement party. Apparently, my parents' absence at my wedding became a topic of conversation, and people took notice. When family members ask why my parents weren't there, I don't embellish or try to make them look worse, I just tell the truth. They couldn't stand that I got married before Molen. Now my parents are furious. They recently reached out, accusing me of deliberately sabotaging Molen's wedding. According to them, my actions have given relatives an excuse to boycott her celebrations. The irony? I haven't spread a single lie. If the truth makes them look bad, that's not my fault. Maybe they should reflect on their actions instead of blaming me for the fallout. And honestly, I'm tired. Keeping up the illusion of a relationship with them feels more exhausting than ever. Their behavior at my wedding made one thing painfully clear: no matter what I do, I will never be enough for them. But the hardest part isn't their absence at my wedding, it's accepting that I never had the loving, supportive parents I always wished for. So now, I'm focused on building a life with someone who truly sees and values me. Update: 2 weeks later, everything came to a head. After reading so many encouraging messages, I decided it was time to confront my parents directly. No more pretending, no more ignoring the obvious. When I called them, they immediately launched into accusations, saying I was jealous of Molen, that I had planned this whole thing to ruin her big day. And then, for the first time, I did something different. Instead of defending myself, I agreed with them. Not in the way they expected. I said, "You're right, I am jealous, not of Molen's success, or her career, or even her looks. I'm jealous of the unconditional love and support you've always given her, love that you never even tried to give me." Silence. Then, my mother scoffed and said I was being dramatic, that they had always treated us equally. And something inside me snapped. Years of repressed pain came rushing to the surface, and I laid it all out. Every birthday where Molen's achievements overshadowed mine. The time my high school graduation dinner was cancelled because she had a modeling callback. How her prom dress cost more than my entire year's worth of college textbooks. I didn't stop, even as my father tried to cut me off. I told them how they spent years planning Molen's imaginary wedding but couldn't be bothered to help with mine. How it felt to see their empty seats at my wedding. How my mother-in-law had to step in for everything, from dress shopping to planning, because they refused to be there. And their response? Deflection. They didn't acknowledge a single thing I said. Instead, they turned it back on me. Why didn't you ever speak up if you felt this way? As if I hadn't tried. As if I hadn't spent years seeking their approval, only to be dismissed over and over again. Then my mother said something that made everything crystal clear. "We never thought you'd go so far as to ruin Molen's wedding out of spite, but we always knew you were insecure about her success." That was it. That was all they saw in me. Not a daughter they had hurt. Not a person with valid emotions, just someone who was bitter and envious of their golden child. At that moment, I realized something freeing: they would never change. They were more upset about Molen's wedding than the pain they had caused me. Even this conversation wasn't about me, it was about her. And so, I let go. I don't know what comes next, but I do know this: I'm done fighting for a place in their world. For the first time, I'm choosing myself. And that feels pretty damn good. I didn't try to fix things this time. For the first time in my life, I didn't retract, apologize, or soften my words. I spoke my truth, unfiltered. You're right about one thing, I began. I was raised by you. You taught me to believe I would never be enough. That Molen's achievements would always eclipse mine. And that upholding the image of a perfect family mattered more than my own feelings. But you also unintentionally taught me that I deserve better than this. There was a long, uncomfortable silence before my father spoke. His voice was controlled, almost icy. Maybe it's time we stop pretending we're bad parents, since you've already decided we are. You clearly take pleasure in watching us suffer. Your family, so we expected you to help resolve this, but it's obvious you've already made your own choices. Then, my mother delivered the final blow, her words sharp and dismissive. Maybe you just couldn't handle not being the center of attention. We always tried to be fair to you, Rebecca, but you chose to play the victim. That's on you. I didn't argue. Why bother? Everything I had said was just confirmed by them. They refused to take responsibility for anything. Even this latest conversation. I simply ended the call with a quiet goodbye. Surprisingly, I felt a strange sense of relief afterward. There were tears, of course, but they weren't the frantic, heartbroken ones I used to cry. They were liberating tears. For the first time, I had said everything I needed to say without hesitation or guilt. Later, my husband found me sitting on the back porch, gazing at the sunset. He joined me quietly, taking my hand without a word. They're never going to change, are they? I asked after a while. No, he replied, his grip tightening gently, but you have, and that's what matters. He was right, I had changed. The desperate child who spent years trying to earn her parents' approval was gone. They no longer held the power to validate the woman who had emerged from that last conversation. It stung to admit that my parents would never be who I needed them to be, but it hurt less than clinging to the hope they might change. For the first time, I didn't care about my sister's wedding or the family drama. I had said my piece, and now they had to deal with the fallout. The strangest part was that I felt like a weight I'd carried my whole life had been lifted. It wasn't the happy ending I'd once hoped for with my parents, but maybe it was the one I needed, the freedom to stop striving for a love that should have come naturally. 3 days later, things have taken an unexpected turn. Molen, as expected, jumped into the drama, but her attempt to intervene backfired spectacularly. Yesterday morning, I received a message from her, dripping with condescension. She'd clearly taken her time to craft it. What you said to Mom and Dad was completely inappropriate, she wrote. They've supported us through every stage of our lives. You can't just blame them for being bad parents because you're insecure about the choices you've made. She continued with her usual mix of moral high ground and subtle jabs. I get that your wedding didn't turn out as planned, but that doesn't mean you should try to ruin mine. There's nothing wrong with wanting a celebration that honors those of us who've put in the effort to meet certain standards. Not everything needs to be a competition, Rebecca. I didn't respond. I've learned that engaging with her only gives her more ammunition. After years of dealing with her manipulative behavior, I blocked her number without hesitation. I expected Molen to back off, but I was wrong. Later that day, my husband called me at work, laughing so hard he could barely speak. Apparently, Molen had been unable to get through to me directly, so she found his personal number and began sending him a series of messages outlining why our sister relationship had always been so fraught. She started off with her usual pseudo-professional tone. As Rebecca's sister, and someone who cares deeply about our family's well-being, I feel compelled to reach out. But it didn't take long for her true intentions to surface. She went on to explain that it was now my husband's responsibility to help me behave appropriately because, apparently, as the new man in my life, he could influence my decisions. The messages grew more patronizing with every text. Family dynamics are complex, she wrote, and someone with Rebecca's sensitivity might not understand the bigger picture. Then came the real kicker. Surely, you realize that maintaining good relationships with successful family members like myself could benefit your future. Rebecca's behavior is hurting her prospects, and yours by extension. My husband found this utterly laughable. He saw right through her manipulative tactics, particularly her misguided attempt to play to his supposed social ambitions. In his own words, she really doesn't know me at all, does she? When I got home that night, we went through the messages together, both of us laughing rather than getting upset. It was freeing to see Molen's tactics exposed, especially since they'd been aimed at someone who was immune to them. From this, I learned something significant about Molen. She's still the same insecure teenager who tries to elevate herself by putting others down. No amount of success or status has changed that, and her attempt to manipulate my husband was a reminder of just how little she understands about healthy relationships. When her direct approach failed, she resorted to using him as a pawn, just like she used to do in high school when she couldn't bully me directly. Same games, different decade. Now, I see her tactics for what they really are. She spent our childhood trying to cement her place as the golden child, constantly comparing her achievements to mine and pointing out my perceived shortcomings. I'm no longer falling for it. 10 years ago, her words might have made me question myself, but not anymore. 5 years ago, this would have devastated me. I would have felt hurt, doubted myself, and maybe even tried to make peace. But now, I find the whole thing almost amusing. I'm just tired of the drama, and her blatant manipulation doesn't sting the way it used to. My husband handled it perfectly. Instead of getting dragged into her theatrics, he simply responded, "Thank you for your concern about Rebecca's well-being. As her husband, my priority is her happiness, not managing her behavior. If you have any concerns, I suggest you direct them to her. Have a nice day." That wasn't the response Molen wanted. She fired back one last desperate message. "I see she's poisoned you against the family too. Don't say I didn't try to help when this all blows up in your faces." Ironically, her help has only made me more certain that keeping my distance from my family's toxic dynamics is the right choice. Nothing has changed. Her messages to my husband only confirmed that she is still the same manipulative person who believes she can dictate the narrative, and that any deviation from her script is a personal attack. The funniest part? She didn't create division between me and my husband, she brought us closer. Instead of agonizing over her words, we laughed, blocked her number, and planned a weekend getaway. That night, as I sat with my husband, I realized something. Real family isn't about keeping up appearances or controlling a story. It's about support, laughter, and standing together when someone, yes, even your own sister, tries to manipulate you. I've never been more certain that staying out of Molen's wedding drama is the best decision. My husband and I have chosen to focus on building our own happiness instead of getting sucked into endless power struggles. They say success is the best revenge. But I've learned that real success isn't about proving anything to others. It's about living life on your own terms, surrounded by people who uplift rather than tear you down. And by that measure, I've never been more successful. Third update. 2 weeks after Molen's failed attempt to manipulate my husband, things have taken an unexpected turn. My parents, in a desperate bid to salvage their reputation, have been scrambling to correct the narrative. Through family connections, I found out they've been calling relatives one by one, painting me as a bitter, jealous sister trying to ruin Molen's wedding, their latest version of events, that I'm resentful because her wedding will be far grander than mine ever was. They even concocted a story that I intentionally left them out of my wedding just to play the victim. The funniest part? They claim I sent their invitation to an outdated email and an old address, despite the fact that they've lived in the same house for 30 years and have had the same email since the dawn of the internet. The best part? No one's buying it. In fact, their damage control is backfiring spectacularly. Instead of turning people against me, they're drawing attention to their own favoritism. Several relatives have come forward, sharing their own experiences with my parents' preferential treatment. One aunt even recalled how my mother used to pull similar stunts at family weddings, always making sure Molen was the center of attention. And now, the ripple effect is hitting where it hurts. Key family members who were supposed to play important roles in Molen's wedding are pulling out. Their exclusive venue, secured through family connections, might no longer be an option. Even a high-end fashion designer, a family friend, suddenly has scheduling conflicts. Then, at a family gathering last weekend, things hit a breaking point. Someone innocently asked about my wedding photos, and my mother lost it. Fueled by jealousy, she launched into a defensive rant about how I had changed since getting married and was trying to tear the family apart. That outburst? It shocked several relatives who had no idea what had been happening. And just like that, their carefully crafted reputation took another hit. The irony is almost poetic. For years, my parents have worked tirelessly to uphold the image of the perfect family, and yet, in their desperate attempt to protect that illusion, they are the ones destroying it. The more they try to defend themselves, the more they expose their own manipulations. People are starting to take sides. Some who previously remained neutral are now openly distancing themselves. Even my father's brother, who always bit his tongue for the sake of family peace, reached out to apologize. He admitted he should have spoken up about their treatment of me long ago and has decided to skip Molen's wedding events altogether. And me? I haven't lifted a finger. I don't need to defend myself. The truth is unraveling on its own. Molen and my parents have spent years controlling the narrative, but every time they try to twist the story, they only reveal more of their true nature. I used to think that staying silent and enduring their treatment was the best way to keep the peace. Now, I see that silence only enabled them. My husband put it best. They spent years building a picture-perfect family image, but it was all held together with emotional manipulation. Eventually, it was bound to collapse. Personally, I've never been better. I no longer waste energy seeking my parents' approval. I no longer carry the weight of managing Molen's emotions. I no longer care about maintaining their illusion of family unity. And for the first time in my life, I understand that sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back, it's letting the truth do the work for you.